We started a new chapter today, and that chapter is federalism. And if you're watching this because you were absent, this is a big picture schematic, and we're going to slap some details on this in the next week or two. And what is federalism? Let's start with the most basic thing. Federalism is power at different levels. And real quick, federal level, post office, military, state level, driver's license, fishing license, local level, how many dogs you can own. And then we have things like our school dress code, which is at the private organizational level. So it's powers at different levels. And if you compare federal, where power is shared between the state and the federal compared to unitary, anytime you see uni, it's one, it's power all at one level, like a federal level, whereas Confederate is powers at the local levels. Obviously, America uses the federal level, but there have been examples of these other two throughout history. And why is it so important? Well, it decentralizes our politics and gives people more opportunities to participate. And I think you caught that from the Constitution section. We don't want any one branch of government to be all powerful. And according to federalism, same kind of philosophy, we don't want any one level of government to be all powerful. So it decentralizes it, it spreads it out, and it lets people participate. Some people want to participate at the school board level. They make all the school board meetings. Other people are concerned with what's going on in Lansing. Some people are concerned with what's going on in DC. But there's more opportunities to get involved if you so choose. And in terms of the divisions of power, oops, I went too fast there. The 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights is really where federalism is, but it's also in the Supremacy Clause, Article 6 of the Constitution. And it says the supreme law of the land is the Constitution, yet the national government cannot usurp state power. So there's this balance. Essentially, there are things just for the federal and things just for the state. And then there's others that are shared. And this chart, not exactly easy on the eyes, but you can see some examples. So at the national level, coining money, conducting foreign relations. Items that are both national and state taxes, those of you who have a job are fully aware of that in different courts. There's a Michigan Supreme Court, there's a U.S. Supreme Court, and things just for the state governments like local governments and conducting elections and that sort of thing. So if there's 3 lanes, those are the 3 lanes to stay in. Now, the constitutional basis of federalism, again, had these major precedents that happen. I'm going to actually hold off on these because we're going to be spending a couple days researching these. But there are major precedents, and you may not know what the word precedent means. It's not president, it's precedent. So George Washington was the president. Now, precedent is a decision by the Supreme Court. And once they establish that, it is going to apply to everybody in perpetuity. Okay, so let's just hold off on these because we're going to go into more detail with these cases. Okay, but I do want to talk about this full faith and credit. And this is important. Now, each state must recognize official documents and judgments rendered by other states. And privileges and immunities. Citizens of each state have privileges of citizens of other states. So I'll give you an example. I got married in Michigan, and if my wife and I were to move to any of the other 49 states, we are married. But it doesn't always work that clean. So I also got certified to be a teacher in Michigan. Some states would accept that, other states would make me take a new test. In fact, one of my good friends who just retired from Clarenceville moved to Florida, and he was able to teach in Florida no problem. And other states, it's a little bit different. So some are really cut and dry, and others it depends. Okay, but that's the full faith and credit. So intergovernmental relations today. Okay, so we have this idea of dual federalism. Now, dual federalism is this idea, and it's not probably the most effective way to do business because it's super confusing. Where both the national and the state are have supremacy within their own sphere. So it's like layer cake or lasagna, where it's just you stay here, you stay there. And it ended in the 30s because, like I said, it wasn't the most effective way to do business. So that's kind of a relic of the past. And there's the idea of cooperative federalism, which is a system of government in which powers and policy assignments are shared between states and the national government. This is more like marble cake, where it's kind of swirled together. And they share costs and administrations, and the states have to follow federal guidelines. And then there's fiscal federalism, which is the pattern of spending, taxing, and providing grants in the federal system. Now, the cornerstone of the national government's relations with state and local governments. Okay, so this is this idea of essentially where does the money go? Okay, basically, where does it come from and where does it go? That's fiscal federalism. And as you can see through the x axis here from 1955 to 2010 and the billions of dollars, see a pattern? Up, 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 up. Okay, we looked at that in class. A little practice with the stimulus. And continuing on with fiscal federalism, this grant system, distributing the federal pie. And I get this in school a lot because people get frustrated. They say, hey, the school bought something and we need to buy other things. And I get that. But it's probably a categorical grant, like those big black TVs in the front of the room, those smart boards. That was a categorical grant for educational technology. That was all we could buy with it. And during COVID, there were grants just for personal protective equipments and vents and all that kind of thing. Whereas block grants are a little more general. Okay, so the federal government will give money to the states or the local governments, but some are categorical, some are block. Categorical is pretty narrow, block is pretty open. And in terms of fiscal federalism, people are trying to get every dollar, and that's kind of the politicking, who gets what. And really, you can make an argument it's the basis of politics and economics. There's only X amount of dollars to go around, who gets what, and why. Now, this idea of the mandate blues, okay, which is cutesy, the book got a little cutesy with you. So, mandates direct states or local governments to comply with federal rules under threat of penalties or as a condition of receipt of a federal grant. So, mandate is a fancy word for telling you have to do it. Let me scale it to something easy we understand. Some people wonder, like, why the heck do we have to do, so many fire drills and tornado drills and school shooter drills and that kind of thing? We're mandated. And if we don't follow that mandate, we lose money. So, bear in mind, a public school is paid for by government dollars. And if the government mandates something, we have to do it. You have to do it. Okay. So the advantages for federalism, it increases access to government. I already mentioned that. Local problems can be solved locally. I'll tell you, there's, time and a place for everything, but I don't want Washington, D.C. to tell me about the salmon in Lake Michigan. I'll let Lansing handle that. And stuff that's going on in Livonia. Livonia is not Detroit. Detroit is not Highland Park. Highland Park is not Grosse Pointe. Every community is a little bit different, right? And if you have local people doing that, state people doing what they're doing, federal people doing what they're doing. So, and it's hard to have any one group dominate when you spread it out in federalism. So that's the upside. The downside is it's very expensive. It's super expensive. However, is it a price worth paying? A lot of people would say yes, right? And, different states have different levels of service. Okay, so it creates this discrepancy, certainly in public education and in other things. Okay, so states have different levels of service. Local interest can counteract national interest. Too many levels of government, too much money. Okay, here's an example. So, state and local spending, there was a few years ago, but we have Washington, D.C., where every child is $16,550. And I'll find one a little less than that. Here's Utah, 5,574. So, in theory, shouldn't every American kid get equal access to education? But in reality, is this actually happening based on the expenditure? Michigan's not doing so bad. See, we're in the blue. Cool, that's good. But that's an example of the downside, if you will. And here's another example. So, we have a lot of different governments. One U.S. government, 50 states, 3,034 counties, all these municipalities, townships. Okay, so there's 87,576 separate governments in America today. That's a lot, takes a lot to fund. However, Does it spread out the power, and does it let people address things at the level it should be addressed? Okay. And federalism in the scope of government, what should the scope of national government be relative to the states? So this is going to kind of flush out your own political inclinations. Are you looking at more of a strong national government, more of a state government, that sort of thing? Okay. And I'll spare you that. Okay, here's the summary. American federalism is a governmental system in which power is shared between a central government and the 50 state governments. The United States has moved from dual to cooperative federalism and fiscal federalism. Federalism leads to both advantages and disadvantages to democracy. So now that I've gone over this, if you go to Google Classroom and you go to these questions, these are the questions to answer if you were absent. Okay, so if we click on these, there should be some repeats. Hey, look at that. Hey, right down the line. All right, so that is it, and we will attach some details to what you learned today in the next week or two, and I appreciate you watching.